Very much an accidental umpire. Very much, I did not want to become an umpire. Virendra Sehwag's full of advice standing next to me at square leg. He'll tell me how I should be umpiring, he should be telling me what I should be doing and what decisions I should be making. And Sean Pollock came up to me at the end of the over and he took his South African cap and he put it on the top of my hat and said, "Welcome to the team, mate. You've just become our new 12th man substitute fielder."
Favorite Indian cuisine?
At the moment, dal makhani. Well, a couple of things. When I left Cricket Australia full-time employment, I started a business called Integrity's Values Leadership with a couple of other colleagues. And part of that process was to really try to pen and anchor a lot of my main learnings, my main messages, how I thought I could help other people achieve their potential, how we could unlock their performance, how we could find their gaps, find their performance gaps between where they are now and where they want to get to, how we could get really specific about those gaps in those performance areas. And I wanted to share as much as I could about my journey, about what it took to get to the top, what it takes to stay there for a reasonable period of time, cover some fundamental questions about how I started, why I left, what's important, how to build some of those life skills, how to underpin performance at the elite level. So I think we've done a lot of that with this book, and it's been a great journey to date, and I would really encourage people to pick it up and have a read and see whether they can connect with some of those messages and achieve their potential. Very much an accidental umpire. Very much, I did not want to become an umpire. There is one exception to that, I must say. When I started to look for a part-time job going through high school, I approached Barry Knight, who had an indoor cricket centre up the road, and I started umpiring on a Tuesday and Thursday night indoor cricket. I did 2 nights a week, $30 a night. So I was actually umpiring for money and wanted to become an umpire, and then played a lot of indoor cricket myself. And I suppose when I was given that opportunity with one of my cricketing mates, David Budge, who I was opening the bowling with in park cricket at the time, and David wanted to do an umpiring course, and he convinced me to go along, and we sat the 4 nights and we did the 10 hours of training and did the 60 multiple choice questions at the end, and he managed to not get the 85% and I managed to get more than 85%, and here we are today. But I don't think at one stage that I really started my career. It was very much a hobby. It was very much something to do on a Saturday afternoon to get some part-time income from as I was going through university at that stage. And at no stage when I started did I thought it would become my full-time job, or at least being able to sit here and talk to you about either writing a book or having some sort of career to talk about. Amazing. Well, I'll be very humble and say I would not be sitting here if it wasn't for the New South Wales Cricket Umpires and Scorers Association, because the quality of their training and the quality of their friendship and mentorship that they offered, and the amount of information that they freely gave out in working with me and other umpires as we came through, both on and off the field. I was very lucky to have some good coaching at the start, some good mentorship at the start, some excellent training at the start, and a lot of people that were very giving, as I said, of their advice and their wise counsel. And from that, I was then introduced to other coaches and other people throughout my career, through Cricket Australia or through other umpires. I was lucky enough to cross-pollinate with other sports like AFL, Rugby League and Rugby Union. And out of my Rugby Union contact, I sort of found my coach in Russell Trotter, someone who I really clicked with. And then he introduced me to other coaches. He introduced me to other resources from other sports. And from that, I've always had a coach, and I've always had a number of coaches in various different fields, whether that's a fitness coach or a nutritionalist, or whether that's a financial advisor, umpire coaches, and I still work with umpire coaches today. But Russell sort of stuck with me as a bit of a life coach. And I really am very much a convert that good coaching is all about asking good questions and challenging and helping you diagnose your own weaknesses and your own potentials and opportunities. And they're a bit like a GP for me, a bit like a general practitioner, a doctor that you might go to. Yeah. They'll help you diagnose the problems, they'll help you maybe offer a little bit of medication to alleviate the symptoms, but then they'll send you off to a specialist. and that specialist then will work with the coach or the GP to actually help you solve your problem and get back to full health, or even go to that next level of performance. It's always an interesting question to answer, because when you give out names like that, people think that if you don't mention someone that they weren't important, or so by excluding people draw connotations from that. But I'll try to answer your question by saying, look, I've worked with a lot of great umpires in my time, and they're all important to your own development, and we always focus on team success. So one of our strategies is always to try to help your mate have a good game at the other end, whoever they happen to be, because we're judged as a team and we need to make sure that we both umpire successfully well. But look, a few people stand out as being very much alike or comfortable, and people that you would normally gravitate towards. And I'll, again, at the risk of naming a few people for you and the audience, it's about making sure that we don't draw conclusions by exclusion. But people like Darryl Hare, people like Rudy Cootson, David Shepherd, Ian Gould, Steve Davis certainly do stand out. But then there's been a lot of umpires that I stood with in my early games, and again, you know, it's really interesting to name people, but there are so many that sort of help. And yeah, but internationally, with a lot of people that they would recognise, they're probably the names that I throw at you straight off the bat. I always went through to make sure that my preparation was really, really thorough. And how do we go from good to great? So there were lots of things that were basics, fundamentals, that I had a lot of checklists around. And then I go to that extra level around what ifs. What if this happened? What if that happened? And make sure that we did our preparation as a team as well. So if we had a doubtful catch, or if we had a boundary referral, or if we had obstructing the field appeal, some of those more obscure things that happen, that we had some idea about how we were going to handle those. Right through to what ifs around, well, what if no one picks me up at the airport? What if I need to get into a taxi? Do I know where I'm going? Have I got some rupees in my pocket? Have I got some local language that I can use to get by with? So the preparation was that way inclined. But I was always big on match goals. I would normally have 3 or 4 match goals, and maybe that's what you're referring to, that I would have things written down in my toolbox that were important to me about what I wanted to do that day and how I wanted to execute my umpiring. And then I would have some positive statements. I would have some moments that I would really reflect upon that would build self-confidence. And I would constantly reaffirm that I can be a good umpire, I will be a good umpire, and I am going to be a good umpire. And I'd keep some of those statements in my book. I'd keep some of those statements around me. I'd reflect on what was important on the day, that, you know, when I left the room, made sure I had my cap, I had my counter, and I had my courage. Well, there's a lot of tips in the book about managing distractions and coping with pressure, and I suppose focusing on the right things at the right time. It's really about keeping it simple. It's about your game. It's about making sure that you don't worry about what other people are thinking about. You don't allow yourself to be reading newspaper articles. You're not overly concerned about what people might be saying about you. It's about getting back to being centred of what's my role here. How do I control my thoughts and emotions, because it's a very mental game, and don't let them control you. So there's a lot of mental strength and application there. It's about keeping the game as simple as possible. We are so good at taking a very simple game and overcomplicating it. Most of the things that happen inside the boundary are pretty simple. It's a game between bat and ball. If you go back to a lot of the cricketing advice from the greats of Sir Don to Sachin or whatever, they'll tell you, all you got to do is watch the ball, hit the ball, watch the ball, hit the ball. And there's various ways of doing that, which can be overcomplicated by technique. But at the end of the day, you've just got to watch the ball. Or in my game, you've got to be in the moment. You've got to connect with the moment. You've just got to be able to do and not think. Don't overthink the game, because I think that's where it comes from. There are so many different varied opinions about what to do and how to do it, and as cricket umpires we get lots of advice from the media, from the fans, even from the players standing next to you. Virender Sehwag's full of advice standing next to me at square leg. He'll tell me how I should be umpiring, he should be telling me what I should be doing and what decisions I should be making. I just keep it simple, just worry about my game. Watch the ball, stay in the moment, make a decision. All good. Well, I mean, you're asking, you said before, more than 200 matches. I think probably I've done over 100 first-class games. I've probably been involved in, over 400 international matches, and you're asking me to single that down into one most difficult? Well, I'll give you a couple. I talk about a couple in the book around my worst game of cricket, where I made a number of mistakes, which was Headingley in 2004, which was England versus New Zealand. So I talk about that game, and from a bounce back ability or a recovery from setback mode, that was it was my most difficult match. It was my hardest game. But then you might talk about other games from a hype or a media frenzy perspective, and then I would talk about how to handle pressure, and I'd talk about India-Pakistan semi-final 2011 World Cup. Or you talk about some other ICC events. Or if you're talking about nerves and anxiety, normally your first games are the most toughest. You see your first one-day international, your first test match, where you're entering an environment that you're not used to, that you haven't seen before. And it takes some time to actually feel comfortable, that you feel as though you belong in that environment. So they're tough in a different way. So hopefully it gives you a bit of a flavour about what is the toughest and add some context into it. Well, I haven't been in touch with DRS now from a technical point of view for a number of years, so I'm not familiar with how accurate it is right now, so that's a question for somebody else to offer. And for me to speculate or offer an opinion might create unnecessary debate or comment. But you raise an interesting point that yes, DRS is involved in decision making, and it's not about right or wrong necessarily from an umpiring point of view, but it's a matter about how we adapt. And so there's a chapter in the book about adapting to different types of technology and keeping an open mind and making sure that we don't think negatively about change, that we sort of embrace it and welcome it, because we've got no control over that change. And when the administrators and the broadcasters bring it in, we have to adapt it into our game with a positive mindset, but also to how we're going to then, I suppose, make sure that it doesn't become that distraction that I talked about earlier. So because it's an uncontrollable, it is what it is. We just can't think that it's right or wrong, or we can't worry too much about how accurate it is or perceived accuracy that might exist. Now, so when someone goes like that, and we've got to then go like that and say, here, we've got a decision coming up to you, it's different. It's different. And I'll explain to you why I mean, why I say that. So if you go back to 2011 in that Cricket World Cup that you've touched on already, it's my first game of that tournament. It's in Delhi, which is where we are today, Feroz Kotler. It's West Indies, South Africa. Johan Both is opening the bowling from my end, first over. He's bowling right arm around the wicket to Chris Gale. Chris Gale, third ball, fourth ball, lunges forward to play the delivery, misses it. There's an LBW appeal. Not out. They all get together in this huddle and you think, gee, did I get that right? They're all talking about it. Are they going to go upstairs or not? All of a sudden the skipper turns around and he goes like that. Here we go. Over to you, Murray. We've got a DRS LBW referral. I thought the impact was outside off stump. Over to you. And then he proceeds to dissect my decision on the big screen in front of me and also millions of people on TV, in TV land and at the ground. And he works through front foot fair delivery, going through to spin vision. Looks like there's no bat. We'll just check side on. Okay, no bat. Going through to ball tracker. Stand by. Yeah, Murray, I'm standing by. I'm not going anywhere. And he works through that decision and he works through those issues, and then he finally gets ball tracker. And he says, Simon, pitching's okay, impact outside the line of off stump. And you just think, wow, I've got that one right. But had I got it wrong, I'm faced with that unenviable position of having to change my decision again in front of millions of people on that delivery, and mentally either thinking two things. One, thank God that mistake was fixed up and no one's going to have a go at me and tell me about it for the next 59 overs or whatever it happens to be, what's left in the game. Sorry, I should say 99 overs. Or I could sit there and say, I've got that one wrong, how am I going to then focus on the next delivery? So it's not about whether the technology is right or wrong in terms of the process, but it's how we adapt to the thought process about how we get back on our game and not make another mistake. And pre-DRS and post-DRS, both ways of handling that are completely different. And then it depends upon our attitude about how we handle that mistake or what we do next. So it's a very different environment that we work within, and I challenge you and the people watching to see whether or not they would be comfortable with millions of people assessing their performance at work every day of the week. And it was a tremendous day. It was interesting to be part of history. You saw both elements of sport at play there. You saw tremendous elation from the Indian batting pair. So I think Yuvi was obviously the guy hitting the sixes, but I think MS Dhoni might have been the guy at the other end. So you saw tremendous elation and the crowd going crazy because there's a lot of Indians who live in Durban. And then you saw the other side of the scale where Stuart Broad obviously felt probably quite low and needed a bit of consoling, a bit of support from his teammates. And in some respects, I'm not sure Stuart Broad was happy to be part of history that day, but that's sort of the juxtaposition of sport. And as a cricket umpire, my job was simply to signal them, but I feel very humble, and it's nice to be asked a question about what's it like to be part of history, because if that makes you feel as though that you've contributed to the game, then that's great. But I also feel as a bowler, I feel a bit of sympathy and a bit of empathy for what Stuart went through on that day. Yeah, well, funny enough for me, the most dangerous position was not actually in the centre on a cricket field. The most dangerous position was actually in the nets, when you would go to warm up or you'd go to sort of get your eye in or feel comfortable and ready for the game. And the batsmen who really gave us the most amount of challenges in terms of safety and danger were Chris Gale, David Warner, Virender Sehwag. Three of those names come to front of mind, if you like. But as an umpire at the bowler's end, out in the middle, you get into trouble when there is a deflection at the last second. So when a spin bowler, for example, goes to shape to catch the ball, and then they realise, hang on, that might cost me a finger or two, and they sort of pull their hand out of the way, or they do try and catch it, and it deflects. That's really the worst thing that can happen. Or as a cricket umpire, for me, it's square leg. I would try and stand a bit closer than most people because I wanted to be in the game and not standing too deep and feeling as though that I'm out of the game. And standing in the game is also presenting its own challenges. And I remember one day I actually did get hit at square leg. I was doing a game in South Africa, funny enough, Durban again, and Andrew Strauss was batting. Sean Pollock was the bowler, and Straussy left-handers pulled this ball off Sean Pollock, and it sort of curved, and I'm standing there at square leg thinking, this is going to miss me, it's going to miss me. No, it's not going to miss me. And I tried to turn at the last second, and it got me straight in the middle of the stomach. And I felt more embarrassment than pain, even though it was a pretty flush on hit. I felt really embarrassed because as an umpire, you never want to get involved in the game that way. Anyway, it cost Andrew and England 4 runs, I reckon. And Sean Pollock came up to me at the end of the over, and he took his South African cap and he put it on the top of my hat and said, "Welcome to the team, mate. You've just become our new 12th man substitute fielder." And again, I felt embarrassed, and I didn't really want to have that attention thrown on me. But yeah, sometimes being out on the field and also in the practice nets are really dangerous. So I do believe what you give out is what you're likely to get back in return. I do believe that the harder you work, the luckier you get, and you make your own luck. But there always is, an element of luck to anything that you do. And life's about timing, and sometimes you're lucky to be in the right place at the right time. But I also think that the universe has a funny way of giving to you what you focus on. And if you visualise, if you think positively, if you create opportunities, you're allowing the universe to try to give you what you deserve, not what you want, what you deserve. And I am a believer in superstition. You know, I put my left shoe on first, I put my left cricket pad on first when I play. I believe that sitting in the right place or the same seat is, if things are going well, why change it? But yeah, on that day, on the third day, I didn't sit where I sat for the first 2 days for some reason, mainly a timing reason. And here we were, where had I sat where I would normally sit, I would have been the one that was shot not Asan. And wow, not that I would wish that on anyone, but how lucky was I, how unfortunate was Asan. And so hopefully I've explained that and given you a bit of an insight. Well, that's an interesting take, given that we've played day-night cricket now for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So, would you call it a revolution? Probably not. But it's in this country, it's obviously going to be a new thing to see live for the first time. And so, from that perspective, I really hope that a lot of people go out to Eden Gardens and see it for themselves, and all the indications are that that's likely to happen. So I really hope that the two teams put on a fascinating game of cricket for us, and the contest is very close. So I'd certainly like to see that. And it's going to be interesting to see how the spectators adapt to that, and whether they're able to leave work, go and watch a session or two of Test cricket during the week and see some more bums on seats, as it were. It's going to be interesting to see how the players adapt. It'll be interesting to see how the umpires adapt. It'll be interesting to see how the SG ball adapts to its first run in a test match in this country. So exciting times. India-Pakistan semi-final. Adelaide Oval. Greg Matthews, Shane Warne. At the moment, Dale McKinney. Okay, Australia. Yeah, I'd do things differently. I'd talk more about my mistakes. I'd spend a bit more time enjoying the journey. Would be two things that I'd do differently.